Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are joining us for Intelligent Automation in Oil and Gas. My name is Nicole Bamford, and I'm the moderator for today's session. On behalf of Leslie, Angeliki, Quinn, Candace, and I, we thank you for joining us for day 2 of the event. This panel presentation, Consolidating Software, Which Ones to Lose and Which Ones to Choose, will be given by Pedro Buhigas, Chief Information and Technology Officer at Basic Energy Services, Matt Weis, Business Operations Analyst, Corporate Management Systems at Cimarex Energy, Biju Misra at Director Operations Enterprise Services at Enbridge, and your panel moderator today will be Rob Ratchinsky, CEO at Engage. Their presentation promises to be well worth a listen. Before we get started, here are some quick administrative points. During the webinar, if you have any questions for the presenters, please submit them into the Q&A box and they will get to them as soon as they can. Likewise, for any technical issues, please write them in the Q&A section and we'll get to those right away. The widgets on your screen can be resized, dragged around for your viewing preferences. We encourage you to visit the Resource Center on your screen for additional content and resources we and our sponsors have provided for you. So make sure you're sitting comfortably, and I'll now hand it over to Rob so we can begin.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to get a little personal. Yeah, my name's Rob, co-founder and CEO of Engage. I am in lovely Dickinson, North Dakota this AM. I believe Pedro's in Fort Worth. We got Biju coming out of Canada and Matt in Denver, unless you guys are traveling. That's where everybody lays their head. I wanted to get a little personal here. Let's start with a question on you guys. What was your first job, Pedro? With all the success that you guys have had in your careers, I wanted to take it all the way back.
My first job ever, I was a bag boy at Meijer grocery store in Columbus, Ohio.
Nice. How about you, Biju?
First job was running the printing press at the college newspaper.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Midnight from 12 to 5.
12, ooh, a good shift, a nice shift there. How about you, Mr. Weis?
Actually, I framed houses every summer in the middle of Oklahoma summers, so lots of fun.
Warm. Did you ever get hit by a tornado?
Luckily not. No. I missed all of them. No.
I myself worked at the illustrious Dairy Queen making ice cream cones for people when I was 16. So I like that. I guess we've come a long way. I'm excited about sort of the panel today because all of these men, 2 of them I actually work with closely, are really helping us frame up where the industry is headed with respect to software adoption, the digital transformation that's taking shape here in a weird year for 2020. I think we may get into some of the challenges that the current environment has presented. Yeah, excited today. I'm going to start off with kind of an easy one. When you guys, and I'll start with Matt. Matt, when you look at legacy systems that Cimarex is currently using, what are some of the decision points that or the decision trees that you guys use to decide on going to the market and picking up new software, cloud-based or not?
Yeah, anytime that we're doing any kind of analysis on replacing legacy systems, we do a pretty thorough analysis on kind of the value add back to the company. And that's where we start. What's the piece of the pie that we're trying to capture? What's that remaining 20% of efficiency that we're going to get with that software? And then for us, the big problem is we're so intertwined with different modularized systems. How do we pull that all apart and reintegrate something? And so that's kind of where we have a high cost of change that we have to kind of overcome every time we change systems. But really, it's kind of, if we can overcome that cost of change, is that value going to come back in the next couple of years? And what does that look like over a 5 to 10 year time frame? So that's kind of how we start with our analysis.
I know some of those currencies can be soft. Do you guys bake in, not only the intrinsic costs to those softwares, but also the effect that it'll have on the staff's efficiency and how it's going to change the workflows?
Yeah, and to speak to the soft value adds or intangibles, we try and bake them in as much as possible, but that's probably where we struggle the most because, in our minds, we're an engineering focused company. We focus on hard numbers, hard data, what's it look like on paper. And so for us, we always try and quantify that back, even if it's estimates. We say it's going to save 10 hours per week. And then we say, okay, what's the average salary? What's this? We always try and get back to numbers. But there are always those intangibles that we have to list out on a slide or in a pitch deck that says, and here's what we couldn't quantify, but we know it's out there. We know we can capture it.
Right. I mean, I know in today's day and age, it's not about, rip and replace, but it's getting tools to your employees that can make them more efficient and drive better business intelligence throughout the entire ecosystem. Pedro or Biju, any comments with respect to that question?
No, I echo the same feedback. I mean, we're an asset-heavy company, so we value everything on return on asset. So what's the return that this asset is going to generate for the company? So all-encompassing direct costs, indirect costs, direct efficiencies, and indirect efficiencies as well. So we do a very thorough ROI analysis and across the board from, how many clicks are we saving an employee on a daily basis and attaching a cost to that click. So most of the time we're directionally accurate, after the fact when we do postmortems. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I echo the same. I think there's a technology strategy component to it, saying, are you going to be going to the cloud or not? And I agree for asset-heavy industries. I think that's always a case on return on asset. Then yeah, there's this value component as to what you actually get when you're done, and what does that look like, and you kind of add it all together and you say, well, does it make sense or not? So there are times when you have to do a rip and replace. I find in our space, every 5 years or so, 5 or 8 years, there's this a cycle that continues about ripping out legacy systems and replacing them with big ones or new ones, whether it's in customer care, whether it's in work and asset, and so on. But yeah, I think fundamentally we're all probably following the same approaches as a standard, I think, across industries when it comes to efficiencies and what you get, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting using the word standard. I wanted to kind of dovetail into another question regarding not only your legacy softwares, but the teams that support those. And maybe I'll kick this one to Pedro first. We've had some conversation here in the past. When you look at your IT department and making those decisions with respect to bringing on new softwares, do you feel like you guys, as on the operator side, need a sort of a new age skill set? And possibly this isn't for maintaining an on-prem technology, but in some cases actually setting up an integration team that can work with the dozens of APIs and other instruments that we use to combine all these technologies and really get the best use out of the data. Pedro, what are you seeing, and how are you spinning up your team at Basic?
Yeah, that's one of the most challenging aspects of my job. It's recruiting and
talk. I'm not on a microphone.
Recruiting talent and nurturing talent. When I look at staffing now, and of course we're a small team, relatively speaking, is the new IT person is not that person that does one thing very, very well. I think we're beyond the times of having an SAP ABAP developer, right? Essentially one person who has one job and one job only. Instead, the value really comes when you have a technologist that is able to interact and learn and work with multiple different technologies in order to bring value to the business. And then when needed, go out to market and contract or consult to get those really deep skill sets that are needed for a given project. But when you're talking about an in-house IT group, I'm of the mindset that I'd much rather have a broader skill set for each individual that are able to move from project to project and then tap the market when we need really deep skill set on a specific tech. Because technology changes so much that the cost of retooling your internal team over and over every few years is extremely high. Not to mention that, when you're constantly changing, you're never really gaining that super deep technology, competency on one tech, and those are, like ABAP developers or, AS400 development or something like that. So I much rather have broader and shallower knowledge to where individuals are able to find the right tool for the job and either execute internally or go to market in order to get the deeper skill set.
Okay, I want to add on to that, kind of pile on. Biju, do you think that in respect to what Pedro is saying there, that you have pushback from your intern, with a company the size of Enbridge, do you guys get pushback because you do have these specific roles that have been filled and positioned maybe for a decade? And are you guys comfortable moving those technology shops that are in-house today to teams that and partnerships outside of your company where they're, I guess we'll call it more up to date, state of the art, and sort of transitioning and trusting other teams outside of Enbridge with your data and moving your company forward?
Sure. Yeah, and we've been kind of doing that for some time. And to Pedro's point, it's kind of difficult to make sure that everybody's up to date and so on. So, we've always thought in terms of core and commodity. What is core competency and what's the things you can give away? And we've landed on, design, architecture, thinking, analysis. Those are the kind of things that are core because that's the understanding of the company and so on, and everything else is a commodity. So when it comes to build, test, deploy, and so on, and we've been in that model for quite a while. And even now, as we move to a different new normal, if you will, I think it's not unique to us. Lots of companies are kind of looking back and saying, well, how much of this do you really want to keep and how much do you want to give away, right? And we do that across the company now because times are different, the way we operate is different, and what's out there and how things change is different as well, right? So I think that's common now. I think it's more and more common, it's more and more inherent because in order to scale up and down, depending upon what's happening in the environment, you actually need some variability in the workforce that you have. But you want to make sure that what's really important for you is to understand how the company works and what makes it tick. And how would you design and architect what you have is something that we want to keep as an IP. And then, engage anybody and everybody possible. We have a vendor marketplace today where we go out and we bid for work and people come back, give proposals, and we pick and we go in that way so that we have more choice, more competition in the work that we have, but at the same time invest. And I think that's the important thing about core competency is once you get there, then you start deciding that if you have $1,000, where are you going to spend it? And then you're going to spend it on core. And not really work on the commodity stuff that you just don't need or you need, but somebody else can do much better and much faster and easier.
Are you guys seeing pressure on or any changes to the pricing structures? I mean, when you look at the typical, what we now are all used to in a SaaS model environment, and you're with companies that have had legacy softwares either built in-house or ones that have been adopted, 15 years ago, are you guys seeing those software companies keep up and changing their models and their pricing? Or are you guys seeing this as a complete flip, especially within an industry that was behind, to say the least, with respect to their transformation? What are you guys kind of seeing? Is it all new, or are you guys seeing your legacy softwares turn the corner and catch up?
I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that a lot of the legacy stuff is moving. There's lots of vendors who are like, hey, this is the only option that we have because we're not going to go to the way it was on premise just because one, because the revenue model makes more sense, but it also gives you more convenience and flexibility. It'll be interesting to see how asset-intensive companies that are always return on asset manage this whole cloud migration and sort of what that means, because it's not really an asset. So what do you do? But yeah, I think that's a pattern that's happening, and all of us are adapting and evolving to that. I think somewhere in the end, there'll be a middle ground, because you still have, even if you move to the cloud, you still have a whole bunch of on-premise. There's still things around integration that you have to work out. There's still things around maturity of cloud solution when it comes to segregation of duties and compliance. There's still time to catch up. So I think there'll be some time before everything moves, only because there's some constraints around how, when it comes to compliance and operations. I don't know about the other. I'm sure they've had similar experiences or not.
Pedro or Matt, Pedro or Matt, are you guys seeing anything different in your organizations?
Yeah, I mean, personally, what we see from ability to innovate specifically or specially is that a lot of the SaaS companies have a leg up because they're newer, they're fresher, right? You look at a legacy SAP, for example. We run a SAP ERP on-prem, and when you look at the heaviness of having feature parity from an on-prem, legacy with a lot of history application on SaaS, it takes a severe investment from the vendor to make that migration. However, somebody that comes in fresh and has a fresh slate in front of them is able to innovate much quicker and bring to the table a lot of the features that our users are thirsty for, right? Usability has become a huge thing now. 10 years ago, I think it was okay to hire somebody and put him in front of a green screen and say, that's your tool, go to work. I think today, the marketplace for employment has changed so dramatically that, if you get a young person to come into the marketplace and you put them in front of a green screen, they'll say, no, thank you. I'll go find another job. So we look at IT systems from a usability perspective, also as a employee, not necessarily hire and retention, but overall welfare of the employee. With the realization that people want to come in and they want to interact with systems the way that they're used to interacting at home, right? Everybody has an iPhone or an Android phone, an Apple TV or a smart TV. So, to provide similar methods of interaction, it's becoming more and more important in our marketplace because it's becoming more challenging to hire. For us, hiring is one of the hardest things we do across the board, whether we're hiring a truck driver or whether we're hiring a well operator or a rig operator. And even the truck drivers, when you think about how they interact with technology, from having to provide, hours of service and electronic logs to electronic ticketing to timesheets to checking their pay stub, they want to, it's a feature to them to have mobile apps and usable applications that they're easy to interact with. So we see that, we see usability as a value add to our employee engagement.
Yeah, it makes good sense. It's not only is it challenging to retain those people, but then to get them trained up on these new softwares. I think the companies that are out there doing a good job and are agile enough are providing sort of user experiences where the rollouts and the implementations can be quick and as painless as possible. But even when you look at upgrading those legacy systems, I think there is a lot of pushback within companies because people are just in their lanes and so used to their current workflows. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of switch up. Matt, I know you are involved with a big part of the project management with respect to bringing on these new applications. Do you find it challenging within Cimarex, and do you kind of see this across the industry, not just bringing in new softwares for Cimarex or for you guys to use, but for trying to commingle all the different stakeholders within your organization that a software will touch. I think we're moving into an era where when we consolidate these softwares, they're not maybe now just set up for operations, but they may touch operations, accounting, the planning and finance department, and so on. How do you guys sort of manage that and mitigate some of the turmoil that might cause within your organization?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. It's kind of one of our largest challenges is, getting that deployed and then fully integrated into our different departments. Because we can go to the field office and roll something out and say, here it is, start punching in tickets. We need all this data, and that's great. And then we'll get upstream and someone's going, hey, the data stopped flowing from here. Where is it coming from? So we always start with kind of a large overview of, as the data is generated, where does it flow to, and what are those use cases? And we're pretty, I would say, we don't have a very vertical structure here at Cimarex. We're a very horizontal company. So there's a lot of procedures and processes that happen kind of on their own, independent, but they pull from the same data sources. So for us, a lot of it is a lot of just human contact. We call it the accounting department. We call up the field office admin. We call up the bumper, and we just make a round of, how's the data being used? And then we construct kind of a web or a flow chart of where it's going to, and try and do as much analysis and data gathering as we can beforehand. So that way, when we go into a new deployment, we know, this is going to feed into this system and the data is going to pass on, to its endpoint. It's inevitable that we find some break in that chain. Happens every time. But that's kind of how we approach it. And it's really kind of a people-centric thing. You may hear one little comment from somebody, and it may just be someone under their breath that goes, yeah, and the SCADA should do this. And you're like, oh, that's very, very important. And that has been overlooked for 2 years. So it's paying attention to detail and just making sure you can talk to as many people as you can in the organization to really get a full grasp of the project and how the deployment's going to go.
Yeah, it's interesting from our side, helping on the deployment, working with those different stakeholders provides nuances and unique challenges. Each department kind of sees it a little different. And then, as we all know, depending on where that budget sits within these large organizations can affect timelines and rollouts and who's backing some of these deployments. So with that, I also I want to challenge the audience with Biju and Pedro and Matt here. I can see the Q&A area, and we haven't received any questions yet. Please log some questions, and let's get these guys sweating if possible. Next question.
Yes, Rob, just on Matt's comment. So I think there's always an informal network in an organization. There's always those handful of people in each department that are respected by the general populace. So I think the key to make that transition is to actually know who those people are, because the words that they talk are listened to more than you and I will ever get, just because of the either the years of service or the engagement with their teams. And we found that hugely successful when it comes to field operations exec. You find some of those senior people who are willing to kind of look at what the world looks like and really be able to relate to what that means to them and be able to communicate in their terms to people. We found that to be wildly successful when it comes to deployments.
Yeah, I can imagine. Biju, is that environment the same today as it was, let's say, because I know you've been with the company. Do you feel like you guys are you've been for the company for over, a decade. Are you guys in a better position today, or do you find with the shift in power to the millennial generation that it's becoming easier or harder, or what are you guys experiencing at Enbridge?
I think we're in a better position today. There's definitely a change in demographics of employees. As a matter of fact, in Canada, there's a shortage of people when it comes to the trades. It's a huge shortage of people. So there's less and less people kind of joining. But yeah, I think the demographic change is good because people are coming with different kind of expectations, different skill sets, or in a different place. But still, operations and engineering in the field are people with just years of experience when it comes to, and there's never anything that can compare to that. Somebody who's been in the field for 35 some odd years and knows where valid is just because he's seen it or she's seen it 100 times. And for them to speak to what the change is, in their terms, what it means to them, carries a lot of weight, right? Even with the new generation. I think that's something that we didn't leverage before, I think, completely. And after spending time in the field, I think that's phenomenal what happens and the change that comes about, and just the quote, the resistance just goes away, right? I don't think it's people are resistant. I think what happens is leaders don't take the time to really explain why that's important in their terms that make sense to them. That's what I would say. I think generally in deployments or projects, I think projects are generally at fault of not doing the homework and really finding those people to talk to and talk about, versus always saying, well, people are resistant to change. I don't think people are. People just don't understand what it is. And projects don't take the time to explain why it is important, what that means, and what the future looks like. Yeah. Definitely easier with millennials coming in because they're more adept to sort of what's going on. Yeah, absolutely. We're in a better place today.
So it looks like the talk track today, gentlemen, has surrounded, the people component of adopting technologies and consolidating technologies. We have a question from Raymond at EnQuest here. It says, you all share about sort of people, you guys are all taking a people-centric approach to this system integration. Do you mind to share one example that you see in your organization that you guys have come across with these type of deployments?
About software deployments?
Yeah, as far as, what's a good example of like a success, I guess, that you have seen?
I
Yeah, go ahead, Pedro.
Well, this is cheating a little bit because when we talk about people-centric system, we're rolling out an HCM solution right now, which by default is people-centric. But the whole point for us to upgrade our HCM solution, and this is essentially hire to retire employee engagement, right? So be able to come in, look at job postings, apply for a job, hire a person, move that individual through the onboarding process, welcome them to the organization, continue to engage them through the first, 90 to 120 days of employment, because we see that that's our retention problem, right? Our higher turnover happens in the first 3 months of employment at Basic, because not a lot of people realize that it's hard to, work on a well site with 110-degree weather and ants attacking you in the morning. So we really focus on the end user experience and how we nurture the employee through, the onboarding process, the first few months of employment, how we can make them connect to the network that makes their job easier, whether it be an HSE representative, a short service employee trainer, their manager. Believe it or not, you'll be amazed when we ask people, it's like, when was the last time you talked to your supervisor, right? Having a conversation with your manager, I haven't talked to him for like 2.5 months, and we didn't think that was acceptable. So really, we focus on nurturing the employee experience at Basic in trying to make the most common interactions with the company as easier and painless as possible, but also so that we could track how they were interacting with us and adapt to that interaction over time. So that's one of the recent experiences at Basic. It's a little bit of cheating because it's an HCM solution, which by default is people-centric. I'll give the chance to the other guys to respond, and if there's more time, I have another example.
Anything, Matt, from your side or from Biju?
Yeah, for us here at Cimarex, a lot of the transitions and innovation that we're doing now is going from paper processes to more digital structured data. We're a very paper-heavy industry. And as that, paper is people. Your notes are in your notebook, and that's held by one guy. So if you're doing materials management, right, all that's in your notebook. in the old school way. And we actually, a couple of years ago, we rolled out a new asset management system. And that's essentially what I do is go to the materials guys and say, whatever's in your notebook, we got to put it in here. We kind of had to turn around and say, this system's for you. It's to facilitate you managing your programs and to make your life easier. And that's kind of how we took it from a people-centric view. We said, this is here for the organization, but really we're going to structure on your processes and make it easy for everyone there. And then the data's there for everyone else to use.
Yeah, I agree with the other two. I think you have to take a process-centric view in implementations. That's one. And of course, processes involve people. So you have to kind of figure out exactly what that means when processes change, what that means to people when it comes to implementations. I think there's two parts. One is, directionally where the company is going. That's one part of the story. And the other one is maybe over the years, even change management is maybe kind of confused issue, at least in my view, which is I think change management is about, well, how do we get people to move to the direction the company is going versus, well, let me convince you that this is the right thing to do, right? Because what happens is that's where then lots of, conversation, debate happens. I think we've kind of moved to that. I think that works, which is this is where the company is going. Let's talk about how we get you to understand that direction and go in that way. And we do everything possible to do that, whether it's engaging with leaders, whether it's bringing more help to get people trained. And even when it comes to training and communication and everything, we've always taken a process view to it, which is how does it work from end to end? Why is it important for the company to do that and be successful? And how can you be successful to contribute to the direction the company set? And if there's any issues and risks around that, let's talk about it. But let's not debate a lot about the direction itself, because there's lots of people in the company who are paid lots of money to make choices and direction of the company. And for us is to do and get used to and going. And let's bring all the resources possible to do that, including user experience and all those things to make it better, of course, right? Nobody wants to, because there's an inefficiency that'll come if you build and deploy stuff that doesn't work, regardless of what the direction is. So I think that's been helpful for us.
Yeah, I think a good question just came up with respect to that. This comes from Becky Thomas from I2K Connect. What impact has this new normal had upon your organization? And, we talk about sort of your internal community and those who are the end users. Do you feel like the new world has made it easier to deploy technologies? And do you see increased adoption rates because people are simply sitting in front of their screens more? What are those challenges? What are you guys seeing? And I'll add on another question to that from my perspective. Is there pressure on the companies that you buy software from to really amp up their game from a customer success standpoint, where you guys are really depending on not only the PMs and the program managers from the other side of the equation, but sort of putting some of that onus on the companies that are helping you deploy? Can you guys kind of talk about that new normal?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that one, Rob. So a couple of topics come to mind when people talk about the new normal of COVID, and from a pure technology perspective, security, it's a big word on the new normal, in my opinion. When you deploy systems or you deploy access methods, as we have more people working from home, and the expectation is that they're going to continue to work from home post-COVID, because we've created a new normal. It's you're no longer in a controlled environment, right? So you have a lot more variables when you're talking about new to basic. It's a lot of bring your own device, work from home. And be able to extend our corporate systems to have a similar user experience and security posture when you are within the confines of our buildings to when you're at home as well. So we think about we always had mobile workforce in mind, but that now that we're also extended into bring your own device and use your home printer and use your take your VoIP phone home and use your personal device, your personal phone as well. It's kind of stretching some of those toolkits that we had invested in originally. And of course, usability becomes even more important when you don't have the ability to bring people into a conference room and have training. All right, we just deployed we go live with our HCM system on Monday the 13th, and one of the challenges that we've seen is that people don't pay attention in Zoom meetings all the time, right? You have your Zoom screen on the left-hand side, and you got your email on the right-hand side, and you're catching up on emails or you're responding to text. And when you're in person training, you also get a lot of the nonverbal communication feedback on, hey, maybe that person didn't understand what we just discussed. That doesn't come across in Zoom as well, or web conferences as well. So we've seen that we had to amp up our game on training and getting people used to the new toolkits. And the way that we've kind of made it more interactive is not just have a one-way training communication, but then set up challenges for the people that are being trained. So, in our case with our HCM system, in order to empower people and to log on and get acquainted, then we had challenges to, hey, you go in here and perform this action, and the first 10 people that do that get a mug. The first 20 people to update their picture, get a hat or something like that. So we've created incentives to make the training much more interactive than they used to be, trying to move away from the PowerPoint training scenarios. But also the volume of training has increased. So I think hopefully we reach a new normal where we have a hybrid way of doing business. But certainly training and security are two things that we've seen an impact of COVID new normal.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time today. We're out of time. Pedro, I hope that you took your VoIP phone home and it's sitting on your bedside table.
Yeah, I actually didn't. I just forwarded my phone to my cell phone and called it done.
Well, thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate all the insights today. It's exciting out there with the transformation that's taking shape right now. So with that, thanks everybody in the audience for joining as well. It's been fun. Looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Rob. And thank you, Pedro, Matt, and Biju for excellent panel. For those in the audience, if you want to listen again, this webinar will be available on demand shortly. And thank you to you wherever you are for taking the time to listen in. And we look forward to having you on the next session starting in just a few minutes.